oh my fucking god, Shin Godzilla is the best movie ever made. Okay, so like, I watched this movie late last night. I was like staying up way past my bedtime, but I didn't care, because the movie is amazing. I was up till like 2 a.m. because I just had to be awake, because I was just thinking about Shin Godzilla all night. It's fucking brilliant. Okay, so Shin Godzilla is one I was looking forward to watching since I first heard about it way back in like 2016. I just never got around to watching it for whatever reason. I guess because I never had that much like interest in Godzilla to begin with. But now it's like, ooh, okay. So I'd been looking forward to this like the most of all of these movies, because I just knew some things about it. You know, I knew that like it was directed by Hideaki Anno, the guy who directed Neon Genesis Evangelion and like some other brilliant anime that I love, that I'm a huge fan of, like Fooly Cooly. He's involved in like some other stuff that doesn't come straight to my mind. He's basically like, he's a genius when it comes to giant monsters, you know. They literally hired him to work on the Attack on Titan movies because they have big monsters in them, and they're like, hey, you know, like, oh, what was it? Oh, have you ever seen Nausicaa of the Valley of the Wind? The giant, like, god warrior, and that movie was animated by Hideaki Anno, so, you know, guy's a genius. And his directing style is all over this movie. It just oozes out of every single frame, and fuck, I gotta like compose myself. Okay, so the thing about this movie is that it did really well in Japan. Like, it was a huge deal, hugely successful, and everyone loved it. In the States, not so much, like critically and like audience-wise. People were pretty lukewarm about it. They're like, yeah, you know, it was cool, it was good, it's fine, whatever, it's Godzilla. Fuck you, it's actually amazing, because if you understand the context behind this film, why it is the way it is, and how it relates to the tsunamis in like 2011 happened to Japan, you know, and how slow the response was from their government to, you know, sort of handle the disaster. Like, that's what this movie's about, and it's handled so brilliantly. Like, the first, I want to say 30-40 minutes of this film feels like a comedy, because you're just watching this creature slowly, like, escalate, like, becoming a worse and worse, like, disaster. And you're, meanwhile, like, it keeps cutting between Godzilla wrecking shit and the government just being an idiot. Like, there's all these fucking guys sitting at these chairs in this room, and they're talking about it like, oh, what is it? I think it's probably like this thing. And there's the one young man who actually knows what's going on. He's like, shouldn't we consider that it's probably like an unknown, like a marine, like it's a creature? And they're like, a creature? What, are you stupid? And then it's immediately revealed to be a creature, and they're all like, oh, hey, it's a creature. And then, like, they don't listen to one another. The young guy who was just right about it being a sea creature, he says something else, like he has another suggestion that sounds correct, and, like, everyone else is, like, addressing each other directly, so when he says this, like, 3 guys look at him just like, wait, who are you talking to? like this is a bureaucratic system. We have like things in place. You have to file with Senator E to talk to Senator B, and the Prime Minister is literally sitting right there. And they'll have people like talking like, oh, we need to fire the missiles, and then the person next to him's like, Prime Minister, should we fire the missiles? And the Prime Minister's like, yes, fire the missiles. And she's like, Prime Minister says fire the missiles, and the guy sitting right next to her is like, alright, fire the missiles. Like, they have to go through this long, stupid ladder of people to do anything, and it takes forever. And it doesn't feel as boring as it sounds when I describe it like that, because what you have to understand is that there's a lot of people out there, like James Rolfe included, no offense, but, like, to anyone, if you feel this way about this movie, but there's a lot of people who just don't like it that much because it's too talky. And that's fine. If that's not your thing, that's cool, but what I think what is really understated about it is like, oh, there's not enough Godzilla, there's just too much guys standing around in rooms and talking. Like, no, because there's so much talking, and every line of dialogue matters and is important, and it's constant. Like, it never stops. There's hardly ever a slow moment. And when they're like it's just constantly always cutting, like, line of dialogue, cut, line of dialogue, cut, line of dialogue. It's always like the conversations are always happening. It's just nonstop, throwing everything at you. And the movie's like 2 hours long, but it doesn't feel that long because it's so ridiculously dense with stuff. And it's great in like every single shot. And like the shots that don't have dialogue in them, it's just like Anno knows exactly what 3 shots you need to see. to understand the situation as quickly and as perfectly as possible. Like, you need to see people evacuating the city, we'll show like this shot of people exiting the subway tunnels, we'll show this shot of like the tanks rolling in, you know, it's that sort of thing, over and over again, and it's, God, brilliant, I love it, man, like, this movie doesn't have human characters that are like any more interesting than ones in any other Godzilla movie. It's just that the things they are saying are so much more important and interesting. So that even though it is a movie filled with people talking all the fucking time, it's totally exciting from beginning to end. I thought the whole movie was fun. I thought the whole movie was just like really tense and cool. And that's not even like all of that. Like, I haven't even described what the Godzilla is like in this movie. This is the coolest fucking Godzilla ever. This is my favorite, easily, bar none. He's like this, he starts out just as this creepy, like, underwater, like, you don't see him, he's just like a sea monster with a big, thick tail moving around. It looks kind of like just like a big, greasy dick sticking out of the water. And if you look closely, like, on figures and even a couple of shots in the movie, you can actually see that the tail has like a fucked up looking face on it, kind of like a skull or something. But when he emerges on land, you know, you got all these bureaucrats over here talking like, they're discussing whether or not they think the creature can come on land, and they're like, it probably can't come on land, right? And they're like, well, it has legs, so it's possible. And they're like, no, if it came on land, it would probably be crushed under its own weight. And so the Prime Minister goes out on television and tells everybody, we are certain that the creature definitely will not be able to come on land. And then it comes on land, and a guy like comes up and whispers something to him, and he's like, it did? Just, like, the guy just made himself look like the biggest fucking idiot right in front of everyone. And then you cut to what Godzilla looks like, because the thing is, Godzilla in this movie evolves. He starts out as a little, like, creature under the water, and he gets bigger and bigger. And his second form, once he's come on land for the first time, he's got this big, long, gross neck with all these gills on it, and the gills are just gushing blood everywhere because he can't breathe. And he's got this big, stupid face with like these big, blank, dead eyes, and a big, open mouth that kind of looks like a big, happy mouth, and he's just snaking around, like, crawling all over the buildings, and he doesn't even have arms, he just has little nub arms sticking out of his chest, and so he's just kind of slithering around with his big old legs behind him, his butt up in the air, and he's like trying to climb over buildings and knocking them over with people still inside of them, and just absolutely like piling up cars, and everything in the street is just like shoved to the side, and he's just got mountains of shit like on his sides because he's just snailing through everything. He's just snailing down the streets of Tokyo, wrecking the shit out of everything. And then eventually he evolves to a point where he can stand upright, he sprouts gross little bloody arms, and he is able to breathe on land. And he still looks pretty like dead-eyed and creepy. He still doesn't look quite like Godzilla though. And I think it's at this point that he goes back under the water or something. Oh no, I have to describe one of my favorite scenes. This was the funniest part in the movie to me, was when they bring in 3 attack helicopters. After trying to evacuate everyone, they bring in 3 attack helicopters, and they like triangulate their positions around him, and they're getting ready to fire us and like aim at his head. And like they go through the whole process of being like, Prime Minister, can we fire the missiles? You can fire the missiles. Alright, Prime Minister, we can fire the missiles. He said we could fire the missiles. And they go, like, the attack helicopters are communicating back and forth between each other, and they have to go through one of those processes. And then like, ready, aim, wait, stop, no, there's a person down there, and then like, see? And then it shows you these 2 people on like a railroad track really far away, just kind of like, and so they're like, oh, there are pedestrians present, we should probably cease fire. And so like the government's like, why did they cease fire? And they're talking to him like, oh, tell the Prime Minister there's people here, like, we need to tell the Prime Minister there's people there, can we fire? Prime Minister, can we fire? And he's like, and they say, Prime Minister? And he's like, no. And so like, Prime Minister said cease fire, and they're like, okay, Prime Minister said cease fire. Prime Minister said to cease fire, don't fire! And then Godzilla immediately turns around and just knocks over like 15 more buildings and fucking kills a bunch of people, and then slithers back into the water. Like, if they shot him in that moment, they would have gotten him. But he goes back to the water to rest for a while, and when he comes back, he's evolved again into his 4th form, which most resembles the classic Godzilla. but is still like a really freaky, like tumorous looking creep, because he's like glowing red in parts of his body, and he's got these beady little creepy ass eyes, and he's got like these jagged teeth, this big old mouth, and God, he's just nasty looking. He's got this huge thick tail, and he just looks super creepy when he's just looming in the distance, like slowly coming closer. And he makes his way to Tokyo, and man, like the thing is, this is where the plot really picks up, because everything up to this moment was basically just like the introductory episode for this great series that is Shin Godzilla. And once we got past all that making fun of the shitty government stuff, what happens next is that they literally bring, like, the young man who was right about Godzilla being a creature, he recruits a literal team of autistic geeks to obsess over Godzilla and figure out what makes him tick and how they can beat him. And they just have all these, like, these kind of schlubby looking nerdy dudes and, like, academics, and just, like, they literally say, like, nerds. And they bring them in, and they just have, like, a room full of them. They've got all these, like, computers and stuff set up, and they're just, like, all coming up with ideas rapid fire. They figure out pretty early on in the movie that the best way to stop Godzilla is to freeze him, and of course the plan doesn't actually go into motion until way later on. We have all these other moral quandaries. The US wants to assist them by nuking the fuck out of Godzilla, so for a while there's this big, like, well, what do? Do we nuke Tokyo? Like, we can't just nuke Tokyo, right? Well then, they decide, okay, we're gonna try a missile strike on Godzilla. And that doesn't work, and nothing works, so the US decides to bomb the shit out of Godzilla, and they drop a couple bombs on his back. The bombs stab into him and then explode. There's blood everywhere. Godzilla's pissed. And so Godzilla unleashes his atomic breath, and man, this is the coolest Godzilla scene ever. He just unloads his atomic breath on the city, just bah! And like, it starts out just as this massive cloud of smoke that spreads out over the entire, like, all of the streets of the city, and then it turns into fire, and the fire coats all of the streets of the city and covers some of the lower, like, level buildings, and then he turns the fire, he focuses it into this purple beam, and just turns around, like, he can accurately aim at each of the little, like, planes up there and cuts through them all with his beam, cuts through, like, all the buildings around him, because the beam goes on forever, and damn. And then when they bring in even more planes and try to stop him, he closes his mouth, and his big, nasty, unhinged snake mouth, he closes it, and then shoots more purple beams out of the dorsal fins on his back. And, like, goddamn, this Godzilla is unstoppable. He can evolve to adapt to any situation, and he can shoot these massive, incredibly hot purple beams out of his body, like multiple orifices at once. He looks so creepy and so threatening. He's so cool. I love him. If there was ever a Godzilla I wanted to own an action figure of, it would definitely be this one. Fuck. And so yeah, they have this whole moral issue of whether or not we should nuke the shit out of Japan, because we have to evacuate the entire country basically, but we don't know if we have the manpower to do that, and also if it's, like, okay, because we'd be uprooting all these people from their homes. And shit, what it ultimately comes down to is that the old folks, like, at one point the prime minister dies and they bring in a new guy who kind of doesn't know what he's doing, and he finally relinquishes, like, okay, you know what, like, I'm old, I'm not good at this, I don't know what the hell's happening, I'm just gonna give the reins to you young people, the new generation. You seem to know what's happening, you're picking up on these things faster than we are, so you just do your thing, try to stop it as best you can. And they do, and it's incredible. They actually managed to stop Godzilla by freezing him. And man, it kind of feels like the second half of this movie really doesn't have that much Godzilla in it, because he spends so much of the movie just sleeping after he unleashes that atomic breath attack. But, like, honestly, like, that's fine. Like, this movie is constantly entertaining. I don't give a fuck. Oh, and on top of all that, the most, like, dread-inducing, like, fucking coolest ending shot to any movie is the final shot of this. You know, you got, like, your two main characters, they have their little emotional, you know, well, we did it, we finally accomplished what we set out to do, and, like, what about the future, and all that shit. and then the camera, like, he's staring at Godzilla in the distance, and it's slowly, like, the camera gets closer and closer to Godzilla, and you can kind of see some shit sticking out of the tip of his tail, like he's just stuck there frozen, and the camera pans up to the tip of his tail, and you can see that his tail has started to split off into many little disgusting humanoid Godzilla creatures, and then it just cuts to the end credits. So, like, if they didn't stop him in that moment, Godzilla's next evolution would have been to become many, because I think I read this on, like, a IMDb page or some shit. I don't know if this was a quote from the director or who, but the quote was basically that, you know, this Godzilla can evolve to do anything. If Godzilla is overcome by a committee, Godzilla will evolve into a committee. So he was overtaken by many people working together, so Godzilla would have had to become many Godzilla in order to survive, and he almost did. And that's like the terror that it leaves you with at the end of the movie. And it's brilliant, and I loved it, and I want to watch it again, like, immediately. It was badass. Damn, I can't decide if I'd give it, like, a strong 9 or a 10 out of 10, but I don't know, man, it felt great. It was a great movie. It's not only my favorite Godzilla movie, like, instantly, this is one of, like, the best movies I've seen, period. So, yeah, like, goddamn. And it's not connected to any of the other Godzillas, so even if you don't give the slightest fuck about Godzilla, you can watch this one and have a good time. So, like, whew, yeah, not just as someone who likes Godzilla, but as someone who likes movies in general, like, just check it out. It's a great time.